In this tutorial, you're going to create the L bracket that you currently see on the screen. We're going to start from a blank document. You should title it Bracket Tutorial and then your name. And the first thing I'm going to do is on the front plane, I'm going to create a sketch. Notice how because I clicked on front plane before I clicked on sketch, when my sketch is inserted, this plane is already selected. I'm going to click P on my keyboard to hide the planes. I'm going to click on the front face of the view cube so that I'm looking at it head on. And then I'm going to draw some lines to create the basic L shape to start the bracket. Starting from the origin here and making sure that as I create my lines, they are snapping to automatically be either vertical or horizontal. So now I have the outline of the L shape. I'm going to add in dimensions. Clicking D on my keyboard selects the dimension tool. I'm going to make my bracket 6 inches tall and 3 inches long. And you can see that did some weird things, but I can just drag this part that's still blue. And then I'm going to add that this part right here is 1 inch tall. And then the last dimension that I want, so right now this can still slide back and forth. I want this length right here to also be 1 inch, just like this length. Instead of typing 1 for dimension again, I'm going to use an equal constraint to do that. Now I have my fully constrained sketch. So I click check to save the sketch. I'm going to select the sketch and then create an extrude. And because I had selected the sketch in advance, the extrude already knows under faces and sketch regions to extrude the areas already selected. Instead of the blind end condition where the extrude is only going in one direction, I'm going to choose symmetric so that the extrude goes to both sides of where my sketch is. That way my whole part is going to be centered on the front plane that I sketched on, right? So some on each side. I want the depth of this extrude to be 6 inches. And it's a solid and a new part. So I'll click check on that. And that extrude is giving me the basic L shape that I have. There's obviously a lot of more modifications I'm going to make to this shape. I'm going to rename this extrude L shape because as I start to have more and more parts here, it's going to be very confusing if I just leave everything extrude 1, extrude 2, etc. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a hole that goes through this. So to do that, I'm going to sketch on the back right here. So I'm going to select that plane of my part and I'm going to click sketch. And then I'm going to draw a circle. I want it to be lined up with the origin. So I'm going to hover over the origin. Right, this is going to center the circle on my part. Right, I'm going to make sure that as I click, that constraint is automatically applied. And then I'm going to set the dimension from the center of the circle to the top of my part to be 1.5 inches and the diameter of my circle to be 1 inch. And that sketch is done. Now I'm going to select that sketch and again make another extrude. This time I'm trying to cut a hole in my part. So rather than adding new material, I'm going to change it to remove. And then when I remove, so right now it's doing what I want it to do. It's going to remove a hole all the way through the material. But the blind end condition means it's only removing 1 inch of material. If I were to change my part to be deeper than 1 inch, it would no longer go all the way through. So instead of choosing the blind condition, I'm actually going to choose the through all end condition. So that means that it's going to remove through every part that exists. And even if I were to change this part later to be bigger, this hole would still go all the way through it. So I'll click check on that. And that extrude, I'm going to name it through hole because it's going all the way through my part. I'm going to create another extrude. So this time I'm going to sketch on this front face right here. And I'm going to draw another circle that is centered with this original circle that I already have. So I'm going to make sure I hover over until I've got that center. So it's creating a concentric constraint. And then I'm going to make the diameter of this circle 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to select that circle and again extrude and again select to remove material. So this time I'm removing material from the front. I'm going to leave the end condition as blind, but only 0.25 inches. So I'm not cutting all the way through the part this time, I'm just cutting part way in. So when that extrude is created, you can see this right here where some of the material was removed. The name for this is what I've just created is a counter bore. So I'm going to name my extrude that way. So the next thing I'm going to create is there was another hole on this part right here. Right, so selecting that face, I'm going to make another sketch to draw the sort of slotted hole that I'm about to create. And I'm going to change my view to be aligned with the top face. First of all, I'm going to draw 2 lines. Then I'm going to connect those lines with a center point arc. So using the endpoints. Oh, never mind. I actually don't want a center point arc. I'm going to use a 3-point arc. So it's going to start at one line, end at the other, and then the center of the arc. So just now, as I was setting it, the automatic constraint there, it lined up the center with the edge of that. And I'm also going to make sure that these points are vertically aligned with each other. And that the center of this is horizontally aligned with the origin. And then I'm going to put in my dimensions. The radius of the arc is going to be 0.5, and the length of this line is going to also be 0.5. And now it is fully constrained. So I'll click check on that sketch. And then I'm going to use that sketch to create a hole through here. So I'm going to select the sketch, choose an extrude. I'm going to go through all because I want to make sure that my hole goes all the way through, and I have to change it from add to remove. And now I have another sort of slotted hole at the bottom of this part. So I'm going to name that extrude. It's a slot or a slotted hole. Now the next piece that I'm going to create is there are some triangular ribs on each side of this part. And for that, I'm going to need a new plane to sketch on because I want to sketch right here where the rib is supposed to be. But the only existing plane that I have is the front plane in the center of the part or at the edge of the part, but I want something in the middle. So to create a new plane, I go over here and I select plane. It's going to be offset. The entity that it's offset from is going to be the front plane. Right, so I'm taking the front plane, I'm offsetting it by a distance of 1.75 inches. So I've got, you can see that new plane right there, plane 1. And I'll click check on that. I don't need to see the front plane anymore. And on plane 1, I'm going to create a new sketch. And for that sketch, I'm going to click on these 2 edges of my existing part. And I'm going to project them into my sketch so I can hide my part, and you can see I have those 2 lines. I'm going to draw just one additional line to create a triangular shape, and then I'm going to add some dimensions. And what I want, so I'm going to use this triangle to create a new feature. I don't need how this line is extending up past the triangle. So I'm going to use the trim tool right here, the scissors, and click on that. It'll just trim off the end of that line and also that line right there. So now I have just the triangle in my sketch. I'm going to unhide the part. You can see how the sketch is situated there on my part. Click check. And then I can select this sketch and I'm going to extrude that as well. I want the rib that I'm going to create to be centered around this plane, so I will change the blind condition to a symmetric end condition and the depth to 0.5 inches. And it is a solid, and I'm adding it to the existing part. Everything is just one part in here. So I'll click check on that. Now that rib is towards the front of my part, so that extrude, I'm going to rename it that it is the front rib. And to create the other rib on the other side of the part, instead of redoing that whole sketch and creating a new plane and everything, I'm just going to mirror this across the center of the part. Because the front plane is in the center of my part, I can just mirror across the front plane to get the other part that I want. So I'm going to use the mirror command right there, the entities to mirror, and click on this part. and the mirror plane is going to be the front plane. And you can see the other rib has shown up over there. And so I'll rename that as back rib. And in parentheses, I'll clarify that it's mirrored from the front. So the last piece that I'm going to create is there was a little sort of flange part sticking up from here. So I'm going to make one more sketch on this plane right here. And I'm going to use the slot that I had previously drawn. So I'm going to take that edge and the curve and that edge right there. I'm going to project them all into my sketch. So when I hide my part, you can see what I have in the sketch. And then I want that same shape, but a little bit bigger. So I'm going to use the offset feature, right? And if I select those three lines, you can see how this offset feature is showing up. And if I click and drag on this arrow, I want it to go in offset in this direction where I'm getting a bigger thing. And then when I unselect, I can now type in the dimension. I want it to be offset by 0.25 inches. And you can see the only reason these dots are blue is it could extend farther down, but if I just drag them until they snap to the edge of my part, then it will make that sketch fully constrained. And then on that sketch, I'm going to extrude, and I'm going to be adding material blind to a depth of 0.25 inches. So I'm creating 0.25 inch up, a new addition to my part. Okay. So now I have the basic shape that I want for my part. The thing that I'm going to continue to change here is all of these places where I have a lot of sharp corners. I'm going to use both fillets and chamfers to get rid of those. I don't really want all of these sharp corners in my part. This last extrude I just made, I'm going to rename it. It's called a flange. Okay, so now I'm going to create some fillets. And remember that what fillets do is they take a sharp 90-degree corner and they just round out that corner. So fillet, first I will select the top two corners right here as the two corners. I want to fillet both of them at the same radius. The radius I'm going to select for that is 1.5 inches. And then a chamfer is similar to a fillet, except instead of rounding out the corner, it's just going to use a straight line to cut off the corner. So it stops you from having that sharp 90-degree angle, but you don't have any sort of rounded parts. And the chamfer command is right here, right next to the fillet one. And I'm going to use chamfers on these holes right here. So I'm going to create a chamfer, and zooming in on this hole, I'm just going to use this front edge right there, and that edge right there are the two edges that I'm going to chamfer at a radius of 0.06. And then I'm just going to create some more fillets. So my next fillet is going to be along this edge and also at the back of my part, this edge, right? So anytime you want multiple edges filleted at the same radius, you can select all of them within a single feature. So this radius is going to be 0.5. But then my next fillet needs to be a different radius, so it has to be a different feature. So I've got that fillet saved. Now I'm going to create another fillet, and I'm going to fillet the edges of the ribs. So selecting all of these parts right here, and on both sides, and on both of these ribs. Selecting all of those edges until you can see that everything is rounded out. That is going to be at a radius of 0.1. And then my very last fillet is going to be for the outer edges of the part. So these edges right here, on the back, that edge right there, all around the part. And then on the flange that I just created, also going to select those edges to fillet. And that I'm going to leave at a radius of 0.2. So now my part is complete. You're done with this tutorial.